Okay, today's the big day. Here's the block. It came back from the machine shop. All the cylinders are all bored out to, let's see, these are 4-inch holes and they're 30 over, so it's 4.03. And the pistons themselves are, once again, 4 inches and they're 2 thousandths under, so they're 4.028. We have all new freeze out plugs, oil gallery plugs, same thing on the front, new plugs. Here's our camshaft. We will take that out and put that back in later on. Okay, here's the bottom side. You'll see here's the front of the motor. Here are the mains where they're going to go. And here's the camshaft down here. You can rotate if you want to. But we're going to take that out and put that back in later on after we lube it all up. And then here's the rest of all the parts that have to be cleaned up and put on. And then we have, here's all the gaskets that are required for the whole motor assembly. Here's our new crankshaft, ready to go. Here's our pistons. You'll see they have all new wrist pins on them, brand new pistons. The journals here have been all honed out, they're all perfect size. Then we have the rest of the parts. Here's the timing chain. The chain and 2 sprockets. There's the piston rings themselves. So they all come. Here's the oil rings. Here's the 2 compression rings. Oh, here's the engine bearings. All nicely sealed. And the main bearings the same way. What else do we have in here? Oh, we have the valve lifters themselves. Look at these guys, all nice, brand new. Should be interesting. Oh, we have an oil pump. We have to install the screen from the old one, but we'll do that later on. So, when the heads are all done, so I guess that's about it. I guess we'll get started. Okay, here's our bearings. They come in plastic, sealed in plastic. So the key item is to make sure everything gets put in the right place. There's 2 different kinds of bearings. Well, they're both the same, but on the mains you'll see the bottom one has a hole because there's a hole right here for the oil to come up and lubricate the crankshaft. It'll be the same deal with the rod bearing, or with the main bearing on the other side. You'll see that when you put it in, it matches the notch, and also the hole lines up. So that's what we're going to do with this side. Put these in there nice and flush so they fit perfect. Here's the rear main. Perfect. Snap right in position. See, here's the hole for the block. Here's the hole for the bearing. Here's the notch. There's the other notch. Just seat those right in there, perfect. So remember, one side has a hole, one side does not. The one without the hole goes to the cap. And we'll put the last one in. Perfect, so you can see the hole in the bearing matches the hole in the block. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I got the bearings in, I want to test the crankshaft. So I'm going to put some oil on every one of these. Now I'm going to place the crankshaft in the motor. Okay. It spins nice and easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take the crankshaft back out. I'm going to use this stuff called plastic gauge. I'm going to cut off a little bit of this little piece and put it on the bearing. I'm also going to leave a little piece here. I'm going to put all the caps on, torque them to the right specification, take them all off, and then we'll measure and see how much clearance is there. These need 2/1000 clearance. So let's give that a try. See what I'm doing is just taking this plastic gauge, cut a little piece off, just setting it right there. Okay, the next thing is now I got the plastic gauge over there on the mains. I'm going to set the crankshaft back in. Okay, I don't want to turn it. Okay, we got the crankshaft in there. Let's take a little tiny bit of this plastic gauge. Set it on there. Okay, here is the main for the first one. Make sure it's in there with the notch, all flush. Make sure the arrow is pointing toward the front of the engine. Then install. Make sure the plastic gauge is straight. And just gently install the whole thing. That will take the 2 bolts. Put those in there. And we'll do this for all the bearings, so that we're going to torque all these down, and then after we torque them, we're going to take it all back apart, and then I'll show you how to measure how much clearance there is in each one. Okay, so now let's try the next one. We'll take a little piece of this plastic gauge, cut it off, just leave it on that little journal. There's the arrow going toward the front. There's the notch. Sure sits in there perfect. Arrow pointing, number 2. Just drop that right in there. Little tap. Tighten it up and go to the next one. Come over here to the last one, to the main, rear main here, and we'll put that one right in there. Rear main, see the notch? Fits the notch. Set it right into position. Put the bolts in, and then we'll tighten these up. Okay, we have all of these on. So we just want to tighten these just a little bit. Then we'll get our torque wrench out and tighten them to 70 foot-pounds. Looked up in the manual. That's what they said was the right thing. Okay, so we're going to just torque these down. Here's our torque wrench. We set it to 70 foot-pounds. There we go. When you hear the snapping sound, that's when you know it got to be 70. There's the last 2. And this is the rear main. Okay, now that we got it to 70 all around, now we'll take it all apart again, and then we'll look at what the plastic gauge has to say. So I'm going to start with anyway. Make any difference? Yeah, see if I can get them off. Okay, so when we take this off, here is the plastic gauge. You can see right here. You take the plastic gauge and you match that. See, you match that. See, the big one is 1. So this is just short of 0.002. Okay, here's the second one. Okay, it looks like we got the same results. If we match this one is 0.0015. Okay, here's the rear main. Okay, this one is 1.15. If you match down here, 1.15. Right now, let's take the crankshaft off. Okay, now we're going to just lift off this crank. We can check all those. First one, 0.002. Second one, 002. We look at the main, last one, 0.0015. Okay, so they all look like they're in clearance. So now we'll just have to clean all this up, clean the crank off, and put it back in there, bolt it all down, torque it all down. Before we put the crankshaft in, we cleaned all the bearings here. We need to put the rear main seal in, and see this lip is what's got it, goes right in here, and that goes toward the inner part of the engine. So we just lay that right in there. Flush that all off. Okay, now we're ready to install the crankshaft. Okay, with the rear main seal in, let's just put a little oil on all these. Put some on the seal. Okay. Now we'll just take the crankshaft, nicely insert it right in there. Okay. Just put a little more oil in here. Okay, now we'll start with putting in the bearings one by one. Here's number one. Remember, the notch fits right in there. Arrow pointing toward the front. Number two. Arrow pointing toward the front. Okay, here's number three. Number three, notch is in the notch. Arrow pointing toward the front. Same thing with number four. Arrow pointed toward the front. Then we'll do the last one, which is the rear main seal. Okay, on the rear main seal, you'll see here is the seal over here. This is the point over here. What I'm going to do is put a little dab of the silicone glue because it's so much easier to do this now than it is to do it later on. Okay, so we'll put a little And I put some oil on the seal itself. And the groove is pointed toward the engine. Matches we have here, and just set that right down. Put our 2 bolts in. We got one more to go, the last one. Do a sanity check. Okay, now we have to set our torque wrench to 70, and then we'll start torquing one by one. I think what I'll do is start in the center. There, it clicked. That means it's 70. 70. Front. And the last one at 70. So they're all torqued in at 70 foot-pounds. And look how nice this moves. Well, it doesn't get any nicer. Okay, that is the crankshaft installation. Okay, before I start putting the rods in, this thing gets all full. What I think I'm going to do is put the camshaft in. So, being that this has never been used and it's going to start up a little dry, I will just put a little grease on these lobes. That way when it starts up for the first time, it won't be metal on metal. Okay, so when you look at the camshaft, here's the gear for the distributor, here's for the 4 valves. This last one, there's a rod that goes on here that pushes the fuel pump back and forth. Okay, so what I have to do is put some oil on these. And I will just stick it right through here. Then it has to go through the 2nd bearing, and the 3rd bearing, 4th bearing, and inside here you can see the camshaft going through. And there it is, all fits. See there, it's spinning. See the camshaft in there. Okay, and we'll align that later on. Let's install number 7 piston. Okay, first thing we'll do, just take a little oil down here. Just lightly coat the whole thing because it's just been honed out. There's no lubrication whatsoever. And yes, it will smoke when it first starts up, but we'll all get over that. Okay, the next thing, this is the 3rd hole. It's a 1, 3, 5. This one happens to be labeled number 5. for the 5th piston. Remember the dot going forward. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is install the rings. So let's do the rings first. Before we put these rings on the pistons, what I need to do is check and see if I have the right ring gap. So I get it in here. Move it down about 1/4 inch. And it's got a little gap right there. Of course you can't see that, so okay, it's about level all the way through. And here's your ring gap right there. Let's see, it has just a touch little clearance there. So I guess these rings are good to go. Let me check another one. Here's another one. Let's check this one. It's about the same depth all the way through. So it's got clearance. Excellent. So these are ready to go. Let's put them on the pistons. Okay, now we're going to install the rings on the piston. You'll see there's 3 grooves, oil ring, and 2 compression grooves. So they all go on different, just a touch. So the first thing is with the oil ring. We have this, see, this comes together here, but the real catch is that there's a little lip right there on one side and a little one on the bottom. So we put this on, then we put the 2 rings on. So we make sure all this goes separate. So the first one, this will have it come over here. This is where it joins. These other 2 that lock it in space, one will have the gap here, one will have the gap here. This way it's all located in different spots. So we'll just start, go around here. Okay, that's one. Now the second one, we start, this is where we want it to be. So we start here. Make sure it's on the top of that lip. Come around. And there it is. Okay. So now the next thing you want to do is put in the compression ring. So this one's going to go on this side. The other one's going to go the other way. So we have a special tool. That spreads the rings out. Oh, gotta go to the second one, guys. Second one. Okay. Get a pair of pliers. Okay. So that one goes on this side. Now the third one, which is the top compression ring, it's right there. Okay, so one on one side, second one on the other. These other guys over here, and the center oil ring joins together. Okay, with the rings in, the next thing we need to do is put the bearing on. Remember that we're matching slot for slot. Okay, the other thing is I want to put these two plastic hose, because when I put this through, I don't want it to hit the crankshaft and scar it up. So remember, the dot goes to the front. Now the other thing, see, the rings won't go through. So we have this special tool called a ring compressor. But I think it's a little on the sharp side, so you gotta be careful. Expand it out. Have it go all the way around the piston. And then right here, we tighten it up. And what that will do is squeeze all the rings real close to the piston so that we can get it by. So I'll tighten this up. Piece of wood here. Get that real level. Then I will tap the piston down. And what happens? It clears. Now the piston is inside the block, so what we're going to do now is flip it upside down so we can see the connecting rod coming to the crankshaft. So let me turn this around. Okay, so here is the connecting rod. Now I'll just take the back of the hammer and tap the piston. Make sure that's on there, because I don't want to scratch this. Okay, now that it has made contact, so we can take off these two little rubber things. And remember, as before, we put a little piece of plastic gauge there. Okay, now we take the end cap and match that groove, get in there, perfect. And then when we install it, this groove here matches the other groove, because this side will have a hole, and that will be where the oil comes out and lubricates the bearing. Okay, we'll put the nuts in here. And we'll get our torque wrench and tighten this up to 45 pounds. There's one, 45. Click. That's 45. So now we can just take this off. Take the cap off, and now we will take a look at that. Take our plastic gauge and measure. That one says 0.002, so that's within the tolerance. Do the same thing on this side, 0.002. Okay, now we'll clean that off and we'll bolt it back on. Put some oil on there. Now remember, notch and hole. Slip that right on there. Put the two nuts on there. And then we'll torque them up. That's 45 one side. Okay, now we're going to put the rings on. Remember, it's the oil ring and the two compression rings. This ring has a little gap there, and it also has this little lip right on the side which this catches on. There's also one on this side right there. So when we put these together, we want to make sure that this is in one spot and the other two are in the other. So here is the first part of the oil ring, and here's the bottom one. The bottom one we're going to put over here. Just get that around there. Catch it on there. Okay, now here's the second one. So this one went over here. The center one went over here. This one we want to put over here. So we just slide it around. Okay. There we go. Now we want to put the bottom ring in. That's the second compression ring, and that one, the gap will go here. So, but we can just move that over, and we use this little tool. Spread the rings all the way out, just enough to get it past. Okay, so we'll move that over here. So that gap is on this side. Now we're going to do the top compression ring the same way. Squeeze it out. Okay. Look like they're all set. So here we are. There's the gap. There's our two rings and the oil ring. Okay, now let's go and install it. Okay, let's put the last two in. So let's take the cap off. I'm going to put my two little plastic pieces of hose on here, and then I will put some oil in this cylinder. I'll put a little oil on the rings. It goes around a little bit. Okay, then we make sure they're in the right position. One on one side, one on the other. And these other guys are, one is here, one is here. The back side's on the other side. So next thing we need is the spring compressor or squeezer. Widen that out. Get it around the piston, and then we'll tighten it up. Gotta be careful, this is awful sharp. I'll use this piece of wood. Get the ring compressor really close and tight fit on the block. And then there it goes. I will turn the motor a little bit. Okay, now here is where this rod is coming. But we forgot to put the bearing in there, so we'll put it in there now. The notch is in the notch. Okay. So we'll take the hammer with the back side, just gently tap it in. And just before it goes all the way, I'll just put a little oil on there. I guess I can take this one off. I'll put a little hole in the oil in the crank. Nice tight fit. Take off the other protector there. Take our cap, make the groove, put in the groove, fits perfect. I'll put a touch more oil on there. And remember, this notch has to line up with the notch here. This guy over here has to knot with the one on the bottom, and that completes an entire hole. Okay, notch up. Now we'll check to see if the torque wrench, here's 40 and 5. There's 45. And 45. Okay, here's the bottom of the engine with all the mains in. Here's all the rods in. So let me just spin this over. As you can see, the pistons coming down. Then they start going back up. Okay, now let me turn it over on the other side and you can see what the top side looks like. Okay, here's all the pistons installed. And let me turn it over. You can see it going up and down. There we go.